Hi, everyone. Whether you are joining us live or you're watching this webinar as an on-demand video, thank you so much for being here. My name is Stephanie Smith. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm coming to you today from my home, which is located on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam peoples. I'm the president of the BCGEU, but I'm actually here today in my role as chair of the Public Service Bargaining Committee, and I'm the host of this member education webinar for members of the Public Service Agreement as we prepare to take a strike vote in the coming weeks. Your bargaining committee, including lead negotiator Mike Iso, are also here, and you're going to be hearing from them later as they answer the questions that you've submitted to us. We're scheduled for about an hour, and we want to get to as many of your questions as possible. So I'm not going to take up too much time with opening remarks, but I want to cover a little bit about how we got here before we get to your questions. So bargaining with your employer, the Public Service Agency, started in early February, and your committee declared an impasse in early March after seeing a wage proposal from your employer that missed the mark by a long shot. So a bit of context on the importance of wage proposals this round. The Public Service Bargaining Unit is the largest bargaining unit in the BCGEU. And usually, as you can imagine, we would get a wide variety of proposals that reflect a lot of different priorities. But that really wasn't the case this year. Throughout the bargaining preparation process, you were all very clear that cost of living protection for your wages was the goal this round. And your bargaining committee took that message to the employer, and what we got in return was extremely disappointing. After 2 wage offers that weren't even in the ballpark of what you need, we declared an impasse. And declaring an impasse means that the next step in this process is a strike vote. And I want to be clear, wages are not the only issue that remains unresolved with your employer, not by a long shot, but it is the most important because we know you're united on it. So we're here today to answer your questions about what happens next with the strike vote, potential job action, and everything that might entail. I should also say that while the public service is the largest bargaining unit in the BCGEU, I mean, there are over 33,000 of you. 1,000 more of our BCGEU members are also at the bargaining table this year. In fact, about 400,000 public sector workers are in bargaining in 2022, including BCGEU members in all of the healthcare sectors, members in community social services, members in post-secondary, and where the employers have already tabled wage proposals at those tables, they are more or less the same as what we've seen in the public service table. And accepting those wage proposals would, for all of you, amount to a wage cut, which we know, based on what you've told us, is simply unacceptable. So before I turn this over to Mike Iso, who's going to moderate, I just want to give a quick note about how this webinar is going to work. We asked for questions in advance, and we got a lot of questions. So we've condensed those questions into themes to make sure that we're covering as much ground as possible. Mike's going to read each question, and a member of your bargaining committee is going to answer it for you. You're not going to be able to ask questions live on this webinar, but if you do have questions that don't get addressed, we're going to set up a specific email Dropbox for you to email those questions in. We're hoping to have that for this evening's webinar, but watch for it for sure in this week's member bulletin. We want to make sure your questions get answered so you have all the information that you need. Now, if you have friends that are in your workplaces or colleagues who couldn't log on for any of these 3 live webinars, don't worry. Like I said, this webinar is going to be available as an indexed on-demand video after the session, and a link is going to be emailed to every member of the bargaining unit that we have an email address for. So thank you again for your solidarity throughout the bargaining process. Watch for the webinars to find out what happens next. Oh, and I should say, we're also going to have a telephone town hall this week, Thursday night, for people who perhaps, don't have internet access or who want to dial in again and listen to more information. So I'm going to introduce our lead negotiator and secretary to the Public Service Bargaining Committee, Mike Iso. Mike was a member of the Public Service Bargaining Unit and an activist in Component 6, Social Information and Health. He became staff of the union and is now regional coordinator on Vancouver Island. He's been our lead negotiator for the main public service agreement in the last round and this one. And we're really fortunate to have someone of his skill and his experience leading us at the table. And I'm glad he could be here today to help us moderate this event. So Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate those kind words. So I want to just, before we get to some of the questions, I just want to follow up on some of the things that that Stephanie talked about around how we got to where we are today. And, this bargaining committee has been working together, preparing for this round of bargaining since about last September. And one of the things that the committee did as we got ready for bargaining is that we agreed that we wanted to go out and get as much member input as we could to determine what our priorities were going to be. And when we asked for feedback, you gave us a lot. We had close to 500 proposals that came in from locals around the province. We had a bargaining survey that we sent out to all 33,000 members, and nearly 5,000 of you responded with your priorities in that survey. And in addition to that, we hired Mario Canseco, who is one of BC's preeminent pollsters, and he polled about 5,000 people in terms of priorities for bargaining. And through all three of those streams, plus the feedback that that the committee members had, it was absolutely clear that keeping up with cost of living increases was the priority for wage increases in this round. And I think that was, it was interesting. I don't think any of us could have expected that inflation would run to the levels it has now. In starting about in February of 2021, inflation started to exceed 2%, and 2% was our last wage increase, and it has been increasing monthly ever since with no end in sight. Right now, I don't have to tell any of you what inflation is doing. You see it every time you go to the store to buy anything, or you pay your rent, or you pay insurance, or you pay your bills. Inflation is going up substantially. And it's clear that when we got into bargaining, and we've been at the bargaining table since early February, we've given the employer every opportunity to meet us on our demands. And from day one, we've said, cost of living, protection from inflation increases are our number one priority. And unfortunately, the employer's proposal, as it's been on the table now, would mean that essentially all of you, if we accepted it, would be accepting a wage cut. We just don't think that's reasonable. The wage proposals that the government has proposed are less than half of the current rate of inflation. So clearly we have a challenge. As Stephanie has indicated, the next step in our process is to take a strike vote. And that's what we're here to talk about today, and answer some of your high level questions and lay about the process that will outline where you can get other more specific questions answered. So I am going to go to Maria Middlemas first. Maria's from our administrative professionals component, and I want Maria to talk a little bit about why we're taking a strike vote.
Hi, thanks, Mike, and hi, everyone. I'm Maria Middlemas. I'm the Vice President of the Administrative Professionals Component 12. And together with your second rep, Matt DeMario, who you'll be hearing from shortly, we represent almost 13,000 members across the province. And this is actually my second round of bargaining. So why are we taking a strike vote? As Stephanie and Mike have already mentioned, we heard from you loud and clear when we started preparing for bargaining last year, through surveys, bargaining proposals, through your locals and components, that we needed an agreement that addressed the cost of living adjustments and offered some inflation protection, because anything less was a wage cut. Our bargaining demands seek to address this and came at a clear direction from all of you. We are driven in our proposals by you, our members. This became the committee's priority as your representatives to get an agreement that met your needs and that we could ratify. And for over 9 weeks, we bargained hard to try to achieve that goal. Unfortunately, there was a significant gap between our wage proposal and the employer's final wage offer. A strike vote is important because it confirms the members' support of your bargaining committee's proposals and sends a powerful message to the employer, giving them some incentive, hopefully, to come back to the table. Obviously, our preference is to get a deal at the table, and our goal is to get a deal that you will want to ratify. A strong strike vote will help get the employer back at the table and hopefully make that happen. You also might hear some information from the employer about why we are taking a strike vote. And it is important that all the information you are receiving comes from your union. We are sending out regular communications to all of you so that you can stay informed and know what you need to know. So thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us, and back over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Maria. I think it's important to understand for all members that the next step in the process is taking a strike vote. That doesn't necessarily mean, however, we are going to go on strike. I think in a labor relations environment, and most employers will look at the size of a strike vote and the strength of a strike vote and determine whether or not they have to make a deal with us. And I think it's clear to your committee, and I think it's clear to most members that we would much rather achieve a new collective agreement at the bargaining table without strike action. But unfortunately, it looks like we are going to have to at least take a vote to get ready to move the employer along. And I think I'm going to go to Dean Purdy next, and Dean is going to outline, I think probably the question of the day, which is when is the strike vote going to start? Dean?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Hi, my name is Dean Purdy, and I'm the Component 1 Vice President for Adult and Youth Corrections and BC Sheriffs. I'm a member of your bargaining committee, and I live in Victoria. Believe it or not, this is actually my 5th time at the table and through this process. So yeah, the big question is, when will a strike happen? So the strike vote starts on Monday, May 16th, and will run until the deadline for return of ballots, which is the end of day on Friday, June 17th. The counting of the ballots, including the announcement, will be on Wednesday, June 22nd. So this will allow enough time for the ballots to be shipped to our BCGU headquarters in time for the vote and the count. Now remember, every worksite will have a contact or steward available to conduct the strike vote at your worksite. We're doing paper voting only, as we believe the best way to conduct a vote with a bargaining unit like ours, 33,000 union public service members, is to do it through the paper process. If you don't have a ballot by Tuesday, May 24th, please follow up with your steward. Please don't wait. Once you have your ballot, mark it and return it to your steward or worksite contact as soon as possible. This is paramount. We need to make sure that we get as many people to vote on this. Make sure that you include your member ID or your employee ID so that ballots can be verified that you are eligible to vote. You can find your member ID on your member card and your employee ID on your pay stub. Please get out to vote, and thanks for your time. Back to you, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Dean. So those are important dates to remember. So we have just a little bit over a month to conduct a strike vote, and this is a big province, 33,000 members from every nook and cranny. So the strike vote starts Monday, May 16th. Deadline for returning ballots, as Dean indicated, is Friday, June 17th, and we will count and announce the results on Wednesday, June 22nd. So we think that a month is enough time to be able to ensure that we get a ballot into each and every member's hand. Next, I'm going to go to Judy Fox McGuire, and Judy is going to talk to us about why she thinks it's important to vote in favor of a strike, and does voting in a strike vote mean that we will go on strike? So Judy.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, my name is Judy Fox McGuire. I'm the Vice President of Component 6, which represents the Social Information and Health component. We have over 8,000 members that myself and Cynthia Egley represent on the Public Service Bargaining Committee. There's social workers, IT workers in every ministry. We have probation officers and those who work in social development and poverty reduction. After many, many days at the table, we have decided to take a strike vote. We didn't take this lightly, but the last offer didn't give us any reason to continue negotiation. If we get a strong strike vote, then we can give the employer the incentive to get back to the table, as Mike said, with an offer that we can actually bring to members to ratify. A strong strike vote shows the employer we are very serious about this. We need members to give us that mandate. You know, the bargaining committee has been preparing to take the strike vote since our talks stalled. We have booked activists off work. We have tried to make sure that we have all of the up-to-date information. You may have received a text message in the last 2 weeks. It's really important that we have your up-to-date information so that we can get those ballots out. The public service has changed in the last few years, and a lot of people are working remotely. People are working at home. We want to get those ballots to you directly. So ensure that we have your up-to-date information. We are setting up rooms in all of the area offices where we're going to be coordinating the collection of 33,000 ballots from our public service members. We want to make sure that the stewards have the support that they need to conduct these votes. So we have had a lot of people off to dedicate themselves to this. So our work in the background has been pretty busy in the last couple of weeks. You know, if this strike vote passes, we'll have 90 days to put that into action. And I'm going to let somebody else speak a little bit more about that. But job action means targeted strike action. It means rotating jobs action, or even an overtime ban. It's really important to remember that we are the elected bargaining committee, but this is your collective agreement, and you are making the decisions on what we're going to do from here on. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Judy. Appreciate that. I think it's important to just highlight Judy's last comments. This is your collective agreement. Your committee has worked very hard in trying to put your wishes into demands at the bargaining table. And I think with your continued support, we should be able to land a deal that we can be proud of and that you'll ratify. So next I'm going to go to Matt, and Matt's got a couple of big chunks to talk about here. He's going to talk about what would potential strike action look like. So we're moving beyond the vote itself. And the other big piece that Matt's going to talk about is what about essential services? Where is that piece at? So Matt?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. My name's Matt DeMario. I work as a court clerk at the Vancouver Provincial Courts, 222 Main Street. And I'm a member of the bargaining committee representing about 13,000 administrative professionals, along with Maria Middlemiss. And this is my second time at the bargaining table. Yeah, so job action can take many different forms. It can be as simple as wearing a button or putting on a Zoom background. We could do a work to rule strategy, which is a tactic often done by teachers, where we just do what's strictly assigned to us, not doing any extra duties, and taking all our breaks, starting and leaving our shifts on time, something we should probably be doing anyways. We could do a overtime ban, where everyone refuses to work any overtime. In my opinion, the last time we had job action, an overtime ban was one of our most effective tools. We could then escalate to targeted strikes, where we would take out a particular ministry or a particular work site. We could do rotating job action around the province and targeting different regions. And then we could do an all-out strike, where everyone who isn't deemed essential is on a picket line. We can think of these different forms of job action as different tools in our toolbox to put pressure on the employer to come back to the table. Whatever job action we do decide to do, I can tell you that your bargaining committee will do this strategically to have the most impact on the employer, but as little impact on you as possible. We may have to inconvenience the public, but we know that with any public service strike, keeping public opinion on our side is vitally important. After we take a strike vote, we ask that everyone continues to work normally unless you hear differently from your bargaining committee. You will receive a lot of communication from your employer, but please always check in with your union for that accurate information, because the information provided by the employer might be biased.
And I think, thank you, Matt, for that. I think that's an important message, that we need to ensure that our goal with any kind of strike action is to inconvenience the employer and to minimize the impact on members as much as possible. So next I'm going to go to Kassam, and Kassam is going to talk a little bit about essential services. Kassam?
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Kassam Dole. I am the Vice President of Component 5, which is the retail stores and warehouse, so representing over 4,500 members that work in the BC Cannabis, the BC liquor stores, and the warehouses, the liquor warehouse and the cannabis warehouse. So where are we at with essential services? Due to the complexity and size of our bargaining unit, it's a significant task to undertake and to go through all of the essential services. So Section 72(2) of the Labor Relations Code, it defines essential services as facilities, production, and services that are necessary or essential to prevent immediate and serious danger to the health, safety, or welfare of the residents of British Columbia. So what that means basically is that those of you who are deemed essential, unfortunately, won't be allowed to legally picket. However, there will be other ways that you can participate to show your support. So things like wearing a button, and we'll be communicating to you other ways that you can do that as well. With over 30,000 members in the public service, there's hundreds of different jobs and work sites. So this is a massive undertaking going through job by job within each ministry. However, we did start this process weeks ago when it became clear that we would reach an impasse at the bargaining table. It's important to note that essential services negotiated under the Labor Relations Code for the purposes of job action are not the same as the essential services that were designated during the COVID-19 pandemic. Last week, the employer did send us their initial position on what services they think are essential. Your bargaining committee has been meeting with our legal team to review the employer's position and determine which essential services we agree with and which ones we will challenge. When the union and the employer do disagree on essential service levels, the Labor Relations Board will settle the dispute. I will say in general that your bargaining committee will be taking a very hard line on essential services because we want to keep the levels as low as possible. Because we believe that this is worth taking our time on doing right, because if we can successfully keep the essential services low, then any strike will have much bigger impact on the employer. And of course, when we do reach an agreement, we will be communicating to all of you on what those services were deemed essential. Thank you. Back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Kassam. I just really want to echo what Kassam had to say about essential services. It is an absolutely monumental task given the size of our bargaining unit. 33,000 members, 20 or so ministries, a large number of agencies that are covered by the main agreement. It is a huge task, one that we've been engaged in with our legal folks for all of this week. We've got more to come tomorrow, and we'll see if we can reach agreement on most of it directly with the employer. If not, we may be proceeding to the Labor Relations Board to help have them adjudicate some of these questions. Now, next I'm going to go to Judy Phipps, and Judy's got one of the questions that I think is very high on people's list, which is how much is strike pay and how is that determined? Judy?
Thanks, Mike. I'm Judy Phipps, one of your executive vice presidents and a member of this bargaining committee. So, how much is strike pay? If you're deemed essential, you don't have to worry about strike pay. You will continue to work and continue to get your regular wages. If you are not deemed essential and we action a strike, you will only be eligible for strike pay if you participate in picket duty or some other strike-related duty assigned by your union. For those who are eligible for strike pay, the amount you get is set by convention and is laid out in our Constitution. So, per our Constitution, strike pay starts the first day of a labor dispute upon authorization of the provincial executive and their determination that it is a legitimate dispute. To receive strike pay, members are asked to first register for and do picket, or again, other related duties as determined by the provincial executive. BCGEU Constitution and Bylaws on page 26, passed at 2021 BCGEU Triennial Constitutional Convention, point 4, basic strike pay is $375 to $500 a week, or 70% of gross pay, whichever is less. And again, you will perform duties as assigned by your picket captain. Now, strike pay is for members who go on strike. And again, therefore, if you are essential services and continue to work as usual, you will continue to get paid as usual. And lastly, just a reminder that strike pay is not taxable. So hope that information helps. Back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Judy. And I know questions around strike pay are going to be very important for people. And this is one of the areas where we want you to make sure that we've got your contact information, because we're currently working on a number of communications, and one specifically that you'll see in the next week or two deals specifically with strike pay, the ins and outs, the what ifs. I think it's clear that there's a number of variables there in the process by which we will use to get you strike pay. So keep your eyes open for that document. Now, the next up, I'm going to ask Rob to come on, and we're going to talk a little bit about two things. One of which is, what about if you're on sick leave or what have you during the strike vote itself, if you're on sick leave or another type of leave during the vote, and then also similar questions if during the potential for strike action. What if you're on vacation or STIPP, those kind of things. So I'm going to ask Rob to talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Mike. The first part is the month period during the strike vote. If you're not in a workplace, either for STIPP or other leave, or perhaps you're working remotely and you don't actually have a connection with a work site with a shop steward. So it's not straightforward in every case, and we'll have to have some discussions with the employer in some cases. Perhaps it'd be easier for some people to contact the union directly. We are setting up an email address to answer more specific questions, but in the meantime, you can visit the bargaining microsite, and that's www.bargainingbc.ca. And of course, the member portal, my.bcgu.ca, is also available for information. And make sure you speak with your coworkers and remind them to sign up for the portal if they haven't already. I've neglected to introduce myself. I'm the Component 20 Vice President, the Environment, Technical, and Operations Component. This is my 35th year in the public service, and I work for the Ministry of Agriculture and Food in Abbotsford at the Animal Health Center, and I also live in Abbotsford. I represent, I guess it's approximately 5,500 members. It's really hard to tell because our numbers fluctuate quite a bit with seasonal employees in parks and wildfire. The other question that people have been asking is what happens if I happen to have a scheduled vacation, or perhaps I'm on STIP or some other leave during this period of time, that if we happen to action a strike. I should remind people that in my 35 years, I've been on strike one day. And so it's never really been a huge issue for a lot of us. If you're on STIP or any other leave and prior to us actioning a strike, chances are the employer will just continue your leave as per usual, and you'll be paid as per the provisions in the leave. Of course, if we give a 72 hours notice of strike action and then you apply for a vacation day, I don't think the employer is going to approve that vacation. We will continue to work with the employer to answer some of the more detailed questions. Some people's histories may be more complex than others, and we will do everything we can to get that information to you before your contact or steward puts the ballots in front of you. Thanks. Back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Rob. So it's clear that there are going to be a number of questions that people are going to have, more than we can deal with in a session like this. So next I'm going to go to Cynthia, and Cynthia is going to talk a little bit about where you can go to get further information. Cynthia.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia Nepomagli, and I work as a family justice counselor with Kamloops Family Justice Services, Family Justice Services Division, Ministry of Attorney General in Kamloops, BC. I am a member of this Public Service Bargaining Committee for Component 6, Social Information and Health, with Judy Fox-McGuire, who you've already heard from. I actually this is my 30th year with the public service. I started out with in Kelowna with Court Services branch at the Kelowna Law Courts. And then I became a family justice counselor and started my career as a family FJC in Prince George, BC. So where do we go for further information? Like Rob has just said, there's a Bargaining BC microsite, and we encourage all of you to visit this website for regular updates and important bargaining information. The website address is www.bargainingbc.ca. That's gbc.ca. I'll say that again because I made a mistake. www.bargainingbc.ca. There's also the BCGEU member portal, my.bcgeu.ca/login. Please remember that it's imperative that all our union has up-to-date contact information for all of you, all of our members. This includes your personal email, your home address, and personal cell phone numbers. Please encourage your coworkers to log into the member portal to ensure they receive important information throughout the bargaining process. And it's super important. It's been mentioned before, I'm sure, that we use, please don't use the employer's email. So thank you very much to all of you for coming and listening today, and back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Cynthia. So I just want to do a bit of a recap here on some of the key points before I get it back to Stephanie to do a wrap up and a summary. So basically, some dates to keep in mind. Strike vote is going to start on Monday, May 16th. The deadline for return of ballots will be Friday, June 17th. So people across the province have just over a month to get a ballot, to mark the ballot and get it back to us. And we plan on announcing the results and counting on the June 22nd, which is a Wednesday. The question, I guess, that obviously arises from there is what happens after June 22nd, presuming you give us a mandate to take strike action. Under the law in BC, under the Labor Relations Code, A union strike vote is valid for 90 days. So a union has to initiate some kind of strike action within 90 days. And as I sit here today, I can't tell you when strike action will start or what strike action will look like, but you've heard today that there's a number of things that we can do, ranging from a typical strike where maybe everybody's out on a picket line for a period of time, to what's more likely, which is some targeted actions aimed at inconveniencing the employer and minimizing the impact on members. So that might be anything from a work to rule campaign, wearing a button, using one of these Zoom backgrounds, anything like that. We know that there are plenty of questions that members are going to have between now and when the strike vote starts. And during the strike vote, we are going to do our level best to try to get every single person's question answered. So stay tuned and make sure that we've got your contact information, because you will be seeing a lot of communications dealing with specific issues or questions. There'll be a frequently asked questions document that you'll be able to refer to, and people will have an email address that people can write to and with specific questions from there. So we know that many of you have not been through this before. I think it's been mentioned that perhaps as many as 30% of the public service membership has not been through any kind of job action, that you've been hired in the last number of years. So we want to make sure that we provide information to each of you to ensure that you can vote with understanding the issues and the questions, having your questions answered. So this is our second of the 3 sessions we're doing today. We'll be doing another one at 7 p.m. tonight. So if you've got a friend or colleague who is unable to attend now, you can direct them to that call tonight at 7. And with that, I'm going to wrap up, and I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie Smith, your president.
Thank you so much, Mike. Yeah, so just honestly, a couple of things. Thank you so much for logging in. We had, over 1,500 people on this webinar, which is absolutely fantastic. Again, thank you to the bargaining committee for answering the questions. These elected folks who represent you have been working so very, very hard. Mike said since last September. I would argue we started this work as soon as the last agreement ratified in 2019. We've been working to this goal. Also, again, a little bit more about inflation. Mike did such a great job talking about its impact on all of you. And I'm not an economist, but I know when I drive by a gas station these days, or I go into the grocery store, or I'm looking at my rent, which is tied to inflation increases. It is impacting each and every one of us in our pocketbooks, in our lives where we live. And I think this is really important to understand. As Mike said, our last wage increase was 2% in the public service. And cost of living in Canada hasn't been at 2% since about February last year. And so your wages have been losing ground since that time. Anything less than a cost of living adjustment at this point is a wage cut for you. And so that's why we're coming to you and asking for a really super strong strike mandate that shows your employer, our government, how serious you are in this round of bargaining. We want a unified, solid message to the employer. We think they're hearing it through a number of the other things we've been doing, but they need to hear it from you. And again, I want to say we're not in this alone. We have 400,000 other public sector workers who are facing the same sorts of things. But I think it's also very, very important to re-stress that this is your bargaining. This is your collective agreement. And so your input to us, this is a temperature check. We want to check in with you and see how you're feeling about things moving forward. Again, you're going to have the microsite that has been mentioned a couple of times. We're going to have another webinar at 7 p.m. tonight. We will have a telephone town hall on Thursday. We're going to continue to bring you those weekly bulletins, those updates, all ways for you to get informed. But we can't get any of that to you if we don't have contact information. And Cynthia made a point of saying personal contact information. We can't use your employer's cell phones or their email systems when we're trying to tell you what's happening around a strike vote or potential job action. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that, but I'm going to do that. The other background piece that Judy mentioned, making sure we're mapping all of where your work sites are. Your bargaining committee has been working with our organizing department, our research and interactive services department. We've been mapping where those work sites are. We've been reaching out. We've been asking people, and so many of you have already stepped up, put your hand up and said, yes, I will be a work site contact. Send that ballot package to me. I'll make sure those ballots get to my coworkers. So thank you for that. And if you're interested in doing that, get in touch with your local executive, your component VP. We're going to make sure that stewards are supported in this, that there are contacts everywhere. We want to make sure people who are working remotely or who are perhaps on a leave right now, but still want to take part in this vote, that they get a ballot. It's so important that we get a high percentage of engagement around this. And so again, if you haven't received a ballot from either a steward or a worksite contact by Tuesday, May 24th, don't wait. Get in touch with your worksite contact or your steward, and we're going to make sure you know who those folks are. The other thing, again, I think is really important to reemphasize is over the last 2 years of this pandemic, every single one of you watching this was deemed essential. You were the ones who got us through the pandemic, and you're vitally important to get us through the economic regrowth into the future. We know that. Now, essential under the pandemic is very different from essential under the labor code. And thank you, Matt, for explaining that. So again, if you were deemed essential over the pandemic, throw that out for now. You will be told and you will know whether you are deemed essential for the purposes of any job action. So, you know, you're all critically important, but again, it's the job that is essential, and now that is being worked out as we speak. So again, we're going to just keep inundating you with information. We want to make sure that you've got everything you need to make an informed decision. And we know how strong and solid our membership is in the BCGU. And again, I just really want to thank you for your participation today. We look forward to speaking with you more. Thank you so much.